There's a reason why your life has felt different lately. It's not because you've changed randomly, but because you've started to see things that not everyone can see. And since that happened, the energy around you has shifted as well. People are starting to act strangely, and situations feel out of sync. The question isn't, what's wrong with you? But what have you finally come to realize? Before we continue, take a moment to breathe. If these words feel like they're speaking directly to you, hit subscribe, like, comment, and share. There might be another soul out there who needs to hear this today. There comes a quiet, almost imperceptible moment in life when everything begins to feel off, yet strangely clearer at the same time. It doesn't arrive with noise or dramatic change, but with a subtle shift in perception that you can't quite explain to anyone else. The things that once felt normal start to feel rehearsed, almost artificial, as if you've been watching a performance your entire life without realizing it. Conversations seem layered with meanings beyond the words being spoken, and situations you once accepted without question now reveal patterns that feel too precise to be coincidence. It's as though a veil has been gently lifted from your awareness, allowing you to see the structure beneath the surface of reality. You begin to notice how people react not just from logic, but from unspoken fears, insecurities, and hidden motives. You start to recognize emotional undercurrents in rooms, the silent tension behind smiles, the subtle dissonance between what is said and what is truly felt. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that this clarity doesn't feel learned. It feels remembered, like something within you has always known, but was waiting for the right moment to surface. As this awareness deepens, your inner world becomes louder, even as the external world begins to lose its hold on you. The distractions that once consumed your attention no longer carry the same weight, and the need to constantly engage, prove, or belong starts to dissolve. Instead, you find yourself observing more than reacting, questioning more than accepting, sensing more than analyzing. Time itself seems to stretch in strange ways, moments feeling heavier with meaning, as if each experience is trying to show you something you previously overlooked. There is a growing sense that life is no longer random, that there are connections, patterns, and signals woven into everything around you. You might begin to trust your instincts in ways you never have before, realizing that your intuition often speaks before your mind has time to rationalize. And while this realization can feel empowering, it also carries a quiet weight, because once you see things differently, you can't return to the way you used to perceive them. This is the threshold where awareness begins to replace illusion, where you start to step out of unconscious patterns and into deliberate understanding. It's not always comfortable, and it rarely feels convenient. In fact, it can feel isolating at times, as though you've stepped into a version of reality that others aren't fully aware of. But beneath that discomfort is a profound shift taking place, a movement from passive existence to conscious presence. You are no longer just moving through life on autopilot. You are beginning to witness it, to decode it, to understand the deeper layers that were always there but hidden in plain sight. And even though you may not have all the answers yet, something within you knows that this shift is significant, that it marks the beginning of a transformation you can't undo. And it's right at this point, when your awareness sharpens and your perception deepens, that the external world begins to respond in ways you didn't anticipate. The shift isn't always obvious at first, but you can feel it in the subtle changes in how people interact with you. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly may now feel strained, as if there's an invisible tension lingering beneath the surface. Some people become unusually quiet around you, carefully choosing their words, while others seem to overcompensate, filling the space with forced energy that doesn't quite feel genuine. You may notice that certain individuals who once felt comfortable now appear slightly unsettled in your presence, even if they can't explain why. It's not necessarily hostility, it's discomfort, a kind of unspoken awareness that something about you has changed in a way they don't fully understand. At the same time, there are those who begin to challenge you more directly. They may question your perspective, dismiss your insights, or subtly imply that you're overthinking or imagining things. It can come in the form of jokes, passive remarks, or even concern disguised as advice. But if you look closely, these reactions often stem from something deeper than disagreement. When you begin to see beyond surface-level reality, you unintentionally disrupt the narratives that others rely on to feel secure. Your clarity acts like a mirror, reflecting truths that many people are not ready to confront within themselves. And rather than facing that reflection, it can feel easier for them to deflect, deny, or distance themselves from the source of that discomfort, which, in this case, is you. There's also a noticeable shift in energy dynamics. You may find that you're no longer as easily influenced by group opinions or emotional atmospheres, which can create an imbalance in relationships that once depended on your compliance or silence. Situations where you used to go along with things now feel misaligned, and your natural response begins to change. You might speak less, but with more intention. You might withdraw from environments that once felt normal, sensing that they no longer resonate with who you are becoming. And this change doesn't go unnoticed. People who were accustomed to a certain version of you may react with confusion, frustration, or even subtle resistance, as if they are trying to pull you back into a role you've already outgrown. What makes this phase particularly complex is that these reactions can cause you to question yourself. You might wonder if you're being too distant, too intense, or too different. There can be moments where the external feedback makes you second-guess your own clarity, especially when multiple people seem to respond in similar ways. But beneath that doubt, there's a quiet knowing that something real is happening. Because despite the discomfort, despite the social friction, you can't ignore the fact that what you're seeing and feeling aligns on a deeper level than anything you've experienced before. It's not about becoming disconnected from others. It's about becoming more aligned with truth, even if that alignment temporarily disrupts the harmony you once had. And perhaps the most revealing part of this stage is recognizing that not everyone is reacting to you. They're reacting to what your awareness represents. You become a reminder that there is more beneath the surface, that things are not as simple or controlled as they may appear. And for those who are not ready to explore that depth, your presence alone can feel confronting. Not because you're trying to challenge them, but because your way of seeing naturally questions what they've chosen not to examine. This is where the shift becomes undeniable. It's no longer just internal. It's reflected back to you through the behavior, energy, and responses of the world around you, confirming that something within you has fundamentally changed. The truth behind all of this is far more direct than it first appears, yet it carries a depth that most people instinctively avoid confronting. Awareness disrupts control. The moment you begin to see clearly, beyond appearances, beyond emotional manipulation, beyond conditioned expectations, you step outside of systems that once operated unnoticed in your life. These systems are not always dramatic or obvious. Often, they exist in subtle dynamics, unspoken agreements, habitual roles, and patterns of behavior that rely on predictability. When you were less aware, you naturally fit into these patterns without resistance. You responded in ways that were expected, you adapted to the emotional climates around you, and you unconsciously reinforced the structure simply by participating in it. But awareness changes that. It introduces a pause between stimulus and response, a space where you can choose rather than react. And that single shift, small as it may seem, alters everything. When you are no longer reacting automatically, you become less accessible to influence. The words, tones, and emotional cues that once guided your decisions begin to lose their power. You start to notice when something feels off, when an interaction carries an underlying intention that doesn't align with what is being said. And instead of dismissing that feeling, you begin to trust it. This is where your presence starts to feel different to others. You are no longer engaging from the same level of unconscious agreement, and that makes you unpredictable in a way that can be deeply unsettling for those who depend on familiar patterns. It's not that you are trying to resist or oppose anyone. You are simply no longer operating from the same script. And when someone steps outside of a script that others are still following, it creates a kind of friction that is difficult to ignore. For individuals who have built their sense of stability around control, whether that control is emotional, social, or psychological, your shift can feel like a direct challenge, even if no confrontation ever occurs. Control often relies on subtle reinforcement, knowing how someone will respond, anticipating their needs for approval, or relying on their tendency to doubt themselves. But when you begin to trust your own perception, that entire dynamic weakens. You become less dependent on external validation, less reactive to pressure, and more grounded in your own internal clarity. This doesn't make you distant. It makes you sovereign in a way that cannot be easily influenced. And for those who are accustomed to navigating relationships through control, your independence can feel like a loss of access, a loss of predictability, and ultimately, a loss of influence. What's important to understand is that this reaction is not always conscious. Most people are not intentionally trying to manipulate or control others. They are operating from patterns they themselves have never fully examined. Your awareness simply brings those patterns into the light. It reveals the gaps between intention and behavior, between authenticity and conditioning. And when those gaps are exposed, it can create discomfort, not just for others, but for you as well. Because seeing clearly means you can no longer ignore what once felt normal. It requires you to navigate relationships, environments, and decisions with a new level of discernment, one that doesn't always align with the expectations placed upon you. This is why awareness can feel isolating at times. Not because it separates you from people, but because it separates you from unconscious dynamics. You are still capable of connection, empathy, and understanding, but you are no longer willing to compromise your clarity for the sake of comfort. And that distinction changes the way you move through the world. You begin to choose your responses with intention, to engage only where there is alignment, and to step back where there is distortion. It's not about superiority or detachment, it's about integrity. The kind that emerges when you can see things as they are, rather than as they are presented to be. And once this level of awareness takes hold, there is no returning to the previous state. Not because you are forced forward, but because you recognize that what you've gained, the ability to see, to discern, to understand, holds more truth than the comfort of unawareness ever could. Even when it creates tension, even when it challenges existing dynamics, it carries a quiet certainty that cannot be shaken. You are no longer moving through life as a passive participant in unseen systems. You are engaging with it consciously, aware of the forces at play, and grounded in a clarity that makes you far less susceptible to illusion. And in that clarity lies a form of freedom that, once realized, becomes impossible to ignore. But beneath everything that seems to be happening around you, the most significant transformation is not external. It is deeply internal, subtle yet undeniable. This stage is less about what others are doing and more about what is quietly solidifying within you. You begin to notice that your sense of direction is no longer dependent on external approval or constant reassurance. Decisions that once felt overwhelming or required validation from others now emerge with a kind of calm certainty. It's not that you suddenly have all the answers, but there is a growing trust in your ability to navigate without needing to constantly question yourself. This shift can feel unfamiliar at first, almost as if you are stepping into a version of yourself that operates on a completely different frequency, one that values clarity over noise and truth over comfort. As this inner alignment strengthens, your relationship with intuition begins to change in a profound way. What once felt like fleeting impressions or subtle feelings now carries weight and consistency. You start to recognize that your intuition isn't random. It's precise, responsive, and deeply connected to your awareness. It speaks in quiet signals rather than loud declarations, guiding you through a sense of knowing that doesn't always require logical explanation. And instead of dismissing these signals, you begin to honor them. You pause when something feels off, even if everything appears fine on the surface. You move forward when something resonates, even if it doesn't make immediate sense to anyone else. This growing trust in your internal guidance system becomes one of the most defining aspects of your transformation, because it anchors you in something that cannot be easily influenced by external pressure. At the same time, your need for constant engagement begins to fade. The urge to explain yourself, to justify your choices, or to make others understand your perspective slowly loses its intensity. You realize that not every truth needs to be spoken, and not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. There is a quiet strength in restraint, in choosing when to speak and when to remain silent. You become more selective with your energy, recognizing that attention is a form of currency, and where you place it shapes your reality. This doesn't make you indifferent, it makes you intentional. You are no longer reacting to every situation, but responding only to what aligns with your sense of truth. With this shift also comes a deeper appreciation for solitude. What once may have felt like loneliness begins to transform into space. Space to think, to feel, to integrate everything you are beginning to understand. In this space, you are no longer distracted by constant input or external expectations. You start to hear your own thoughts more clearly, to process your emotions without interference, and to reconnect with parts of yourself that may have been overlooked. Solitude becomes less about being alone and more about being fully present with yourself. It becomes a place where clarity deepens, where insight emerges, and where your sense of identity begins to stabilize in a way that doesn't rely on comparison or external definition. This internal evolution also reshapes how you perceive strength. It is no longer about control, dominance, or proving something to others. Instead, it becomes about stability, awareness, and the ability to remain grounded regardless of what is happening around you. You begin to understand that true strength lies in clarity, the kind that allows you to see situations without distortion, to understand people without absorbing their chaos, and to make decisions without being driven by fear or expectation. It is a quieter form of power, one that doesn't demand attention but is felt through presence. And the more you embody this, the less you feel the need to seek recognition for it. What makes this phase so significant is that it marks a turning point. You are no longer trying to become someone else, but rather returning to who you have always been beneath the layers of conditioning and expectation. The noise of external influence begins to fade, and in its place, a steady sense of self begins to emerge. You move with more intention, speak with more clarity, and choose with more awareness. And even though the path ahead may still hold uncertainty, there is a deep sense that you are now guided from within, rather than directed from without. This is the foundation of everything that follows. Not a sudden transformation, but a steady, irreversible shift into alignment with your own truth. Ironically, as your understanding of yourself deepens and your awareness becomes more refined, you may begin to notice that fewer people seem capable of truly recognizing who you are now. It's not that you have become invisible, nor that you've lost your ability to connect, but rather that the version of you they once understood no longer fully exists. People tend to relate to familiar patterns. They remember how you used to respond, how you used to think, how you used to fit into their expectations. And when those patterns change, it can create a subtle disconnect. They may still see you through an outdated lens, interacting with a past version of you that no longer aligns with your current state of awareness. This can feel disorienting at times, as if you are speaking from a place that others can't quite reach, even when your words are clear. At first, this shift may register as a sense of distance or even quiet loss. Conversations that once felt natural might now seem surface level, lacking the depth you have grown accustomed to. You may find yourself listening more than speaking, not because you have nothing to say, but because you recognize when an exchange is not rooted in genuine understanding. There can be moments where you feel the absence of resonance, the kind of connection where both people are present, aware, and aligned in a deeper sense. And while this absence can feel isolating, it also reveals something important. Not all connections are meant to evolve with you, and not all relationships are designed to meet you at your current level of awareness. What begins to emerge from this realization is a natural process of filtering. It is not something you force or consciously control, but something that unfolds on its own as your energy, attention, and values shift. The environments that once felt comfortable may now feel restrictive, and the interactions that once felt engaging may now feel repetitive or misaligned. Without needing to create conflict or make dramatic exits, you simply begin to step back. You invest less in what feels disconnected and more in what feels real. Over time, this creates space that may initially feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, but is necessary for something new to enter. And within that space, something begins to change. You start to encounter moments of genuine alignment, conversations that feel effortless yet meaningful, interactions where there is mutual awareness rather than assumption. These connections may be fewer, but they carry a different quality. They are not built on roles, expectations, or convenience, but on authenticity and presence. There is less need to explain yourself, less need to translate your perspective into something more acceptable. Instead, there is a quiet understanding that doesn't require constant validation. And this kind of connection, though rare, holds far more depth than a multitude of surface-level interactions ever could. It's important to recognize that this process is not about becoming detached or emotionally distant. In fact, your capacity for empathy and understanding may deepen even further. You become more aware of where others are in their own journeys, more capable of recognizing their limitations without judgment. But at the same time, you develop a clearer sense of boundaries. You understand that empathy does not require self-compromise, and that connection does not mean constant accessibility. This balance allows you to engage with others from a place of clarity rather than obligation, choosing presence where there is alignment and distance where there is distortion. Over time, what once felt like loss begins to reveal itself as refinement. You are not losing people. You are outgrowing dynamics that no longer reflect who you are becoming. The loneliness that may have accompanied the early stages of this shift gradually transforms into a sense of peace, a recognition that being aligned with yourself holds more value than being understood by everyone. And as you continue to move forward, you begin to trust that the right connections, the ones that resonate with your level of awareness and authenticity, will emerge naturally, without force or pursuit. This is not an ending, but a recalibration, a quiet reorganization of your external world to match the internal clarity you have cultivated. So if it feels as though the world around you has subtly shifted ever since you began to truly understand, since you started noticing patterns, questioning assumptions, and trusting your own perception more deeply, it is not something random or imagined. It is a reflection of a real internal change that is now echoing outward into your environment. What once felt stable may now seem fluid, what once felt certain may now feel questionable, and what once felt aligned may now feel out of place. This is not because reality itself has become unstable, but because your relationship to it has evolved. You are no longer interpreting life through the same filters, and as those filters dissolve, a different version of reality begins to reveal itself, one that requires more awareness, more presence, and more discernment than before. This stage can feel disorienting, especially when there is no clear roadmap to follow. You may find yourself moving through familiar spaces with a new sense of detachment, noticing details and dynamics that were previously invisible to you. There can be moments where everything feels heightened, your sensitivity to energy, your awareness of intention, your ability to read between the lines. And while this heightened perception can feel like clarity, it can also feel overwhelming at times, as though you are processing more than you were ever meant to handle at once. But this intensity is not a flaw in the process. It is part of the recalibration. Your awareness is adjusting, learning how to interpret and integrate a deeper level of information without becoming consumed by it. As you continue to move through this phase, something important begins to take shape. A new sense of orientation that comes from within rather than from external structure. In the past, direction may have been defined by expectations, by what made sense logically, or by what was accepted by those around you. Now, that structure begins to loosen, making room for a more internal form of guidance. You start to make decisions based on alignment rather than approval, based on clarity rather than pressure. This doesn't mean the path becomes easier. In many ways, it becomes more complex, but it becomes more authentic. You are no longer following a path simply because it is familiar. You are choosing it because it resonates with something deeper within you. There is also a growing awareness that not everything needs to be understood immediately. In fact, part of this transformation involves becoming comfortable with uncertainty in a way that doesn't create anxiety. You begin to trust that clarity unfolds in layers, that not every answer needs to be forced into the present moment. This patience allows you to observe more, to listen more, and to remain open without rushing to conclusions. It shifts your focus from needing control to allowing understanding, from trying to predict outcomes to being fully engaged with the process itself. And within that shift, there is a quiet confidence that begins to emerge, a sense that even without complete certainty, you are still moving in the right direction. What makes this realization so powerful is that it redefines your relationship with change itself. Instead of resisting it or trying to stabilize everything around you, you begin to see change as a natural extension of awareness. The more clearly you see, the more naturally things adjust. Some aspects of your life will fall away, others will evolve, and new opportunities will begin to surface in ways that may not have been possible before. This is not something you have to force or control. It is something that unfolds as a direct result of your internal alignment. Your role is not to manage every outcome, but to remain present, aware, and responsive to what is unfolding in front of you. And perhaps the most grounding realization of all is this: you are not lost. You are transitioning. The feeling of being in between, of no longer fitting into the old while not yet fully anchored in the new, is a natural part of this process. It is the space where transformation happens, where identity reshapes itself, and where clarity deepens beyond surface understanding. Even if it feels uncertain, even if it feels isolating at times, there is a direction to it, a quiet movement towards something more aligned, more authentic, and more real. And the fact that you can recognize this shift, that you can feel it and reflect on it, is in itself a sign that you are no longer moving unconsciously. You are aware, you are present, and you are stepping into a level of understanding that, once reached, changes everything moving forward.